Hello, I'm Robert Picardo.
I'm Sylvester McCoy. I'm John Bett.
And we are the cast of A Joke, and you are listening to Kneel
Before Pod.
Kneel Before Blog presents Kneel Before Pod.
Hello, and welcome to Kneel Before Pod, the podcast that is exactly what meets the eye. I'm your host Craig, and I have travelled across the universe to discuss the Transformers, reboot, prequel, whatever it is, Bumblebee. To have this discussion, I need to assemble a brave squad of Autobots. So it was tough to find them because they were hiding in plain sight, but we have Aaron.
I don't know if that was good or bad, but hello.
And Angus.
Hello.
I had to go with a kind of Transformers-ish theme for the intro.
No, you did, absolutely.
Yeah.
He didn't want to give away his cover either. He could have waited a second.
What would you be disguised as if you could disguise as something?
So I don't know, something that's the wrong size, so like a gun or a microscope that...
I think we should pick something from our childhoods and but also be something quite useless, so I'll be a space opera.
I think that would just be a couch.
Really?
Yeah. No one suspects the couch.
A soft furnishing robot.
Yeah. It would work. People would walk past me because they're like, nah, a couch can't be dangerous. And before they know it, I'm not dangerous.
It's not as easy to roll out as a couch.
No, I probably need movers to get me off. Perhaps Optimus Prime to put me in his trailer to take me from place to place. Well, that trailer's got to be used for something, isn't it?
It's a mobile battle station.
Absolutely. Do you know, I was wondering if it was going to be you or me that said something like that.
Okay. Right, so before we get into our main topic, which you may have guessed may be somewhat Transformers related, we should start with our normal Kneel Before Rise Against feature so we can talk about something else for a little while. Everybody have entries?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, Angus, I choose you first.
Okay,
Come
so
on, that's
Kneel
not
Before.
right.
Pokemon is not my Kneel Before. My Kneel Before is Batman Ninja on Netflix. I saw it the other day and loved it. I was smiling constantly all the way through, laughing out loud at multiple points. Have either of you seen it?
No.
I'm a little bit far behind on my DC animated movies, so I haven't seen this one yet.
It's amazing. It's the concept is that some MacGuffin goes off at Arkham Asylum, and it transports all the Batman baddies back into feudal Japan. And for some reason, Batman arrives 2 years later than them. So they're all transported by the same event, but the baddies have all had chances to kind of set up their feudal lordships in different provinces, and they're all kind of vying for power over feudal Japan. And it is brilliant. It is the sort of the design, the animation, everything about the way it's presented. It's like Batmanime. It's fantastic. It's I don't want to give away too many spoilers about it, but the climactic battle is amazing. Definitely worth a watch.
Does the animation style change between the two segments, basically?
A little, but not as much. There's a segment in the middle that actually it's to do with a kind of it's to do with the Joker, and you're not really sure what's going on with him. And the animation style changes there, and we were a bit like, why is this changed all of a sudden? What's going on? It gets all kind of dreamlike, and then it changes back. And but yeah, highly recommend it. It's a great watch.
I don't know that much about it. Just haven't had the chance to watch it yet. But my assumption was that it was just going to be another one of these like Elseworlds things where it's just a Batman story but set in feudal Japan.
Yeah, basically.
And they don't explain why Batman's suddenly in feudal Japan because you don't have to.
Well, I suppose that's the point of the MacGuffin, but it's all in Japanese, and just hearing everything, pronounced, that was part of what made it amazing. All this kind of yelling in Japanese. The Joker's fantastic, and as I say, it's all kind of anime, so basically all the kind of stereotypes of that genre are kind of thrown in there, and it's just brilliant.
I will watch it whenever I get the chance.
I would definitely recommend it.
I think with the DC animated films, they need to make films about characters that aren't Batman because there's so many of them.
Yeah, I think the one thing you could level at it is that, yeah, like you said, it is just another Batman story in a different setting, and the characters are kind of as you'd expect them to be, but just kind of out of place and time. But I don't know, there was something about it just really kind of I just really enjoyed it, and as I say, kind of sat there with a smile on my face. It's only an hour and a half long, and it's one of the most enjoyable things I've watched in a long time.
Is it good, or is it ridiculously bad, therefore it's amazing?
No, not bad at all. It's good, but like surprisingly good, and just you're like, what is going on now? What am I watching? So many choices in there, like how Batman decides to disguise himself, seeing as we're talking about robots in disguise. When he arrives there, he has to kind of blend in somehow, and he disguises himself as a Western monk. part of his costume to do with his hairstyle is another just fantastic part of it. It's just one of these like head shaking. It's so amazing, so fantastic that it all kind of builds together to create this just incredible product.
There we go, Batman Ninja. Aaron, what are you kneeling before?
I'm struggling to decide if I'm kneeling before rising against part of it, but I'm going to pick at least season 3 of Travellers to get some mention one way or the other, I think.
Season 3 of Travellers, which recently dropped on Netflix.
Yes, they always do a sort of a pre-Christmas drop, whatever. I don't know if that's a normal slot, but that's definitely theirs. I think they've... I don't know. It's hard to talk about the kneel before without the rise against. But I did enjoy it. To put it simply, I think they've managed to solve the season 2 problem, which we talked about, or at least I go on about quite a lot. And they've also had a good series 3. They've always had a direction to go in. I don't know if they've just ruined that with the ending of season 3, without wanting to spoiler it. But I'm still on board. I don't know, how much do we spoiler of these things?
I would say keep it to a minimum, just in case people haven't seen it. Funnily enough, the time that you do discuss it was on the Time Travel podcast, which appeared on feeds just about a year ago. Almost to the day that we're recording, but we don't know when they recorded it.
Was it a year ago or a year from now?
Well, that's the mystery. May have been recorded. Maybe some of us recorded it. Maybe some of us haven't. I don't know. Such is the beauty of the Time Travel podcast.
It could have taken place in feudal Japan.
Maybe it did. No one can tell. You'd have to listen to it and find out. Cool. Angus, have you seen Travellers? I've not seen it at all.
I have not seen it.
Well, that'll be that then. Fair enough. Aaron likes it. I do want to watch it one of these days. It's just there's too much. I need that. I need people to donate lots of money to the website so I can take a couple of years off and just watch TV. Not that was a plug for donations or anything, but finance my year off, please.
I take a gap year as well.
Yeah. Finance all of our years off. It's a lot of money. But, you know, the listeners can in theory afford it. If every listener gave £1 each, we'd have not that much money. So my kneel before is actually related to the thing I said earlier. I am going to kneel before the trailer for Detective Pikachu. Because I think it looks really funny. Ryan Reynolds voicing Pikachu. When I first read about it, I thought it was a hoax. I didn't think it was real. And then it was like, there's a trailer, and I was like, this has got to be fake. And it's like, no, this is something that has happened, and they've actually spent money on it. And it looks really cool. I've wanted to see live-action Pokemon since I was playing Pokemon, so... I mean, they're not live-action, they're still animated, but you know what I mean. Sort of photorealistic-ish. And I'm sort of getting my wish here, so...
Is this voicing Pikachu as in an I Am Groot kind of situation?
Well, for some reason, the kid, the lead kid, can hear him speak English.
Okay.
In the voice of Ryan Reynolds, but everyone else just hears him say, you know, Pika Pika. It's unknown why, because it's just a trailer, but it looks like a bit of fun, and I quite like the idea of kind of telling these little standalone Pokemon stories, just peppered throughout the expansive universe that they have access to. Of course, it's more likely that if Detective Pikachu does well, we'll just get more Detective Pikachu movies. But yeah, I'm amped for it. I think it'll be cool. Still okay to like Pokemon, right?
Still?
To some extent.
Yes. Why not? Of all the things you could like, what's wrong with Pokemon?
Considering the thing we're here to talk about as well. You know?
How very dare.
Has anyone else seen this trailer? Or did you believe it was a hoax and just scroll past it?
I did see the trailer. I don't know how much it convinced me it was going to be more than a gimmick or not. I mean, that once you've heard his voice, then where does it go from there? And so maybe there's lots of adult humour coming out because he's got this deep, gruff voice and he tells adult jokes or something as well. But I don't know, it could go either way.
I have not heard of it, and it sounds like it could just be another sort of Deadpool tie-in marketing for the next appearance of Deadpool. You know, first Celine Dion, now Pikachu. No one's safe.
I think Pikachu will cameo in the next Deadpool movie. Also voiced by Ryan Reynolds, of course. Because who else would you get to voice Pikachu, apparently? Silly. But, you know, there's a room for a bit of silliness in our lives. So that's that. That's going to be fun. I'll eagerly await it. So let's move on to Rise Against. Angus, you go first again.
I didn't have much. I was going to rise against award shows because the Golden Globes has just happened, and that's all just a bunch of self-congratulating back-patting. But I just saw that Will Poulter has quit Twitter because people were bullying him because of the way he looked in Bandersnatch, and I think that's pretty sad. So social media, probably in general, but more specifically morons on Twitter who troll people off of it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Just people not being very nice because they can hide behind this cloak of anonymity.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go on for hours about, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and I mean that wasn't so much trolling, that was more calculated attack. But yeah.
Yeah, it's just a shame that there are so many examples, but so I could probably save that and say it again for whatever next podcast I appear on. But yeah, that is just a shame and something I am rising against.
Cool. Aaron, do you hate social media?
I despise Facebook with a passion beyond reckoning.
Fair enough.
Including its ability to organise podcasting events.
Especially that.
Just eats into his free time. So, Aaron, what are you rising against?
I think I'm going to have to pick The Good Place Season 3, which is a bit of a shame because I really enjoyed The Good Place when it started. And I don't believe they solved the season 2 problem. I think they just found that they'd got nowhere to go after their big first season. Again, won't spoiler it, but I think once you get past that, there's a big struggle for where they're going, and it's suffering the expansion problem now in season 3, where they, in a comedy drama, now have to save the universe, and it felt like it was lost in season 2, and now it feels like it's just running blindly into the darkness, hoping it'll stumble across something really amazing. I think it's just it's gone too far from its original purpose to really capture what was at the start so charming.
By lost, you mean it's kind of aimless and not like Lost, the TV show?
I do not mean it to be like Lost, no. There are a few things that are like Lost. Yeah.
I don't mind season 3 so much. I'm still enjoying it. I'm still watching it. It's not as good as it has been, but it's still reasonably diverting.
I think the problem was I've found season 1 funny, and it was season 2 that I think they either suffered the problem or make the choice, because I never really know if this is a conscious decision or not on behalf of comedies, to move to drama. It's that assumption straight away in season 2. Well, it's now no longer a comedy; it's a drama with comic elements, and we're watching for the characters. And I thought that's too early for it to make that stumble. Unless people do this by choice, I don't think so. But it made it seem like it had run out of steam very quickly.
I haven't seen any of it, but do you think it is one of those? They had a good idea for the first season. It was far more successful than they expected, and then they had to kind of quickly spin something else out of that idea.
I get that impression, definitely. If it had been cancelled at the end of season 1, it would have been the most amazing cliffhanger ending that you've seen in a simple comedy. Simple comedy is not fair, actually, but in a little comedy drama, and it felt like everything obviously was building up to that cliffhanger, and then I bet everybody thought after it aired, right, what do we do now?
Yeah, I do think that it has a fairly limited shelf life. I don't think there's much further they can go after the point they're at now, so I wonder if they are building up to sort of an end point, and maybe that end point was sort of planned from the get-go, who knows. I guess we'll see. If and when it ever comes back, it's on hiatus at the moment, so it'll... Well,
it
will come back. Yeah,
it's coming back in 10 days, I think.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
You know more about it than I do. Cool.
I do.
Yeah. Fair enough. I can see why there's a lot of people that see it's the weakest, and it's definitely the weakest season. I think it's the only sitcom-y thing I watch. I mean, it's not really a sitcom, but that kind of 20-minute comedy thing.
Yeah.
It's the only one I watch at the moment. And I kind of watch 2 or 3 at a time because I always forget that it's on. And then I'll fire up Netflix and there it is, and then I get 3 episodes, and that's an hour of my life that I get to just sit and watch something. So there we go. My rise against is a recent poll done by The Hollywood Reporter, where they surveyed 2,201 people, asking them what film they would like to see remade, and the top result was Back to the Future. Just, who are these 2,201 people, and what are they playing at? Do not remake Back to the Future. It doesn't need a remake. There's no way you can make it any better than it already was. So just stop it.
Surely not all 2,201 voted for Back to the Future.
No. High on the list was Toy Story. You want a remake of Toy Story when there's a 4th one coming out this year?
I want a live action Toy Story, just like Lion King.
Give it long enough and it'll happen. Yeah, I could have rose against the Lion King trailer as well. That's another story. Indiana Jones was high on that list because why not? And Jurassic Park was also high on that list.
What?
Wow.
They already did that.
We made Jurassic Park. It's called Jurassic World. Yeah, and it was crap. So, I mean, we've got Brexit happening. We've got Trump, and now people want a Back to the Future remake.
The final nail.
Did you know that Brexit has now got a political drama based on it already coming out soon with Benedict Cumberbatch?
Yes, Chris rose against it on a previous podcast.
Good for him. We're now so desperate for telling you, you don't even wait for the event to finish before we dramatise it. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's a bit like making new seasons of Game of Thrones when the books haven't even been written.
It's the first adaptation to eclipse the thing it's adapting. Of course, you can have something like The Hobbit where it's actually quicker to read the book than it is to watch the film. I mean, assuming you read at a reasonable pace. You could easily read The Hobbit in what?
Assuming you exit the European Union at a reasonable pace.
Yeah. So that's that. I did say no politics, but, you know, I had to use it to illustrate my point of the world is going to hell in a handbasket. If we get a Back to the Future remake, that's it. I'm done. I'm just getting off this planet.
It just shows how dire things are getting if you're breaking your own no politics rule.
Yeah. Okay, so that is our award-winning feature. I don't know what award it won, but it won one. The Neil Before Blog Best New Feature Award. There we go.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Keep talking.
So we're on to our main topic, which is the recent Transformers movie, Bumblebee. So we'll start off with a bit of background. What is your background with Transformers in general? Aaron, you go first.
So this is the point in this entire podcast run where we get to talk about something that is really close to my heart and none of this superhero nonsense.
We're not even going to get to the spoiler section, are we?
This is the proper stuff now. This is why we're all here. The rest of it was
filibuster on.
As you might guess, of course, I was raised on Transformers. This is my era, the original. I say the original Generation 1 cartoon.
Not raised by Transformers, so it's not like the Jungle Book.
Not quite, no. And I also read the comics that were around at the same time. And the I think it's 86 actually. 1986 movie was like a seminal point in my existence. That's a film that it's one of the first films I remember. It's when I started to actually pay attention to things like to that sort of stuff. So
86, bang on.
Yeah.
The Transformers : the movie.
Yeah,
That's what it was called.
the two thes in there is a bit difficult, but yeah.
Yeah. Everyone will just call it the Transformers movie or Transformers the movie. Yeah. Only one definite article allowed. Yeah, so you're a big fan. What about anything following the 80s stuff? Have you seen any of the kind of other cartoons? Michael Bay films, dare we say?
Oh, Michael Bay films, good God. Right, so I watched the first of the Michael Bay films and it destroyed my soul. It's obviously you can't expect people to remake things without changing them, and if you don't remake a story in a different image, then you're not doing anything useful. So I won't want to be the person that says there was no purpose behind what he did, but the thing that I wasn't able to get past is the Michael Bay stuff for me didn't capture anything of the feel of the Transformers as I knew them growing up. It felt like something completely different. Fine, they used the same names for the characters. I appreciate they got Peter Cullen in to do a voice that I would have recognised, but that was just on paper, the similarities. The spirit of it, the essence of it, I don't believe he captured any of it. And all that means is it wasn't for me, but when I was in there specifically not enjoying any of it, then that was it. I wasn't going to go back and see it anymore.
Fair enough. Yeah, I get the impression that Michael Bay wasn't even trying to do that, so I suppose it wasn't.
No.
Yeah, it wasn't that he tried and failed. It was just it wasn't on his mind. It wasn't something that he wanted to do. Any of the other cartoons, or did you kind of stop after the 80s cartoon? That was you.
I did see some of the cartoons, but I think because it was such a big part of my childhood, I found it very difficult to watch some of the other ones, actually. It wasn't something that I've watched now as an adult and think, oh, that's an interesting addition, that's taken the plot in a new direction. I wasn't able to intellectually grasp any of the other ones in the same way. Whenever I watched them, it was, well, this isn't the same. Why I'm interested in this. And to some extent, even some of the ones, I think it's Beast Wars, I watched it, and they did a strange new graphics. Was it early computer generated stuff? I'm not even sure, but there were no background pictures at all. They did a great job of designing a foreground, and then it was just a series of grey blobs in the background. And whereas, again, if you're paying attention to the plot, you don't necessarily need that. You watch the foreground, it's fine. It was just another thing that was too starkly different to what I remember as so defining for me, because it was part of that era that we grew up in, people my age, where if you didn't go to church and you weren't getting your morality from other places, you very much, I think, some of us pulled our morality from these 80s cartoons. And some of them were more blatant than that. He-Man, for example, with its end-of-episode lessons. But others still had that sort of guiding light principle behind them, that they were trying to do something for the kids to watch. And I do think part of that defined me. So then when I'm looking at other things later on, and it was totally different, they want to do more challenging plots, they want to go in a different direction, maybe they want to go rebellious, as I think, Craig, you've said some of the 90s stuff is, again, I couldn't connect with it. It wasn't me. It wasn't what I wanted. So I think I'd moved on somehow, or couldn't go back, whichever is the truth.
Maybe this my statement about being raised by Transformers wasn't entirely inaccurate.
Maybe, yeah. There you go.
Dances with Autobots.
Yeah.
So, as a follow-on, what did you think of Bumblebee then, as a film, without spoiling it?
Without spoiling it, yeah, it's much more like the original. It was something that, by contrast, I felt was trying to connect back to Generation 1. It did try and capture the 80s. Obviously, that's not a spoiler. That was so clear all the way through it. It was aimed at, I'd say, a family audience rather than a child audience, but of course the family includes the child. So they really were connecting back to the story that I knew. And because it's 80s, because it's about trying to become better, trying to go beyond your problems, it also had the connection to those old moral stories. I don't think it was a particularly moral story, but you know what I mean? It had that sort of development storyline that wasn't focusing purely on the action and the combat, and it wasn't supposed to be a thriller. It was more of a character piece. So I think I agree with, I saw one of the reviews online because I couldn't help myself looking. Someone said it was the film that was trying to reconnect with the old audience in the way that the Michael Bay stuff wasn't. And to me, that was absolutely true.
Cool. Angus, what's your connection to Transformers as a brand?
As a brand, well, I've got similar feelings to Aaron on the sort of G1 original animated movie sort of era. I can remember I had Transformers toys, I watched all the cartoons, and I played with those toys and acted out scenes from that movie, as kids do. Instead of just making up your own stories, you kind of reenact stuff that you've seen on TV.
The transforming was a lot slower.
Yeah, but I soundtracked it all with, as accurate a noise as I could make. Yeah, I love so much about that movie, and I remember, that some of I don't want to spoil anything that happens in that, but there's some pretty dramatic events and life lessons to be learned about love and loss. The soundtrack of that movie is amazing. I still listen to the music from that soundtrack, and I suppose that's probably what I would have wanted a live-action Transformers movie to be like and to make me feel, and I don't think that any of the Michael Bay ones did that. I did watch a bit of Beast Wars, but I think that was kind of late 90s and I was maybe aging out of cartoons at that point. I say that fully aware that I'm talking about a Transformers film on a podcast.
And you just talked about Batman Ninja.
And I talked about another cartoon that I've watched, yeah, and we spend plenty of time talking about superheroes and cartoons and movies and things like that. So yeah, Beast Wars wasn't really ever much of a thing for me. So yeah, firmly rooted in G1, and I had the knockoff toys, the GoBots and Rock Lords and things like that also transformed. Anything that transformed was cool, and it didn't matter that it wasn't a proper Transformer. And all the other action figures kind of got involved in Transformer stories as well. So that was definitely like that was the driving action that I would have been playing with my toys.
Proprietary properties don't have any place in a child's imagination.
Exactly.
Spider-Man can fight whoever he wants. Spider-Man can fight the Terminator, in my case. So Bumblebee then, what did you think of that as?
Yeah, as Aaron said, I think that it kind of sidestepped a lot of what was wrong with the Bay films, even though he's still involved, taking it back to the 80s and giving it that kind of innocence, making it a story of one girl and her Autobot. Removed a lot of that, just the kind of world-ending nonsense that Bay had in his movies, where it was just giant battles and massive robots smashing into each other over and over again for 3 hours at a time. Again, what I loved about the original animated movie is that kind of relationship with Daniel and Hot Rod. And even though the human character is supposed to be who you identify with, I always wanted to be a Transformer, so I would prefer to have been Hot Rod. So in this case, I suppose I want to be Bumblebee, but but yeah, it kind of gets back to that core plot point there of that bond between one boy, or in this case girl, and their best friend, who happens to be a transforming robot.
Cool. My connection to Transformers is far less profound. I don't really have one. I didn't watch the cartoon growing up. I was more into Turtles and superheroes and Power Rangers. Although I totally get it, because when you talked about sort of aging out of the first generation of these characters, I was a bit like that with Power Rangers. Anything beyond Mighty Morphin I was less interested in until it got to the point where I wasn't watching it. And then I got a serviceable, I would argue very good Power Rangers movie in, I think, 2017. That paid homage to the original in a way that I enjoyed. So, someone put some effort into that one as well. That was nice. I liked the Michael Bay films. I'll qualify that by saying I know they're not that good, but I really liked the first one when I first saw it. I hated the second one. Everybody hates the second one. I like the third one, and then the two Mark Wahlberg ones I'm fairly indifferent to. The fifth one, I think, is one of the most boring things I've ever had to sit through. It's just, I don't know, maybe by that point I was fed up with it, and I was like, this style can't show me anymore. It has, it's given me everything I can get out of it, so, I don't want any more of these. So this film kind of weirdly answered a need that I didn't know I had, and, I really enjoyed it. I could understand what references they were trying to make to the old stuff, but I wasn't really connected to them, but I don't think it throws those references in your face either, which is nice, because there's nothing worse than continually pointing out how clever you are and how much you remember something that was old and trying to pass that off as nuance. So it's good that the references are there, they're off to the side, they're there to be enjoyed if you like them. And if you don't understand them, it doesn't affect your enjoyment at all.
Was that statement aimed at J.J. Abrams?
Yes. Well, it is now that you said it. But, it's aimed at anything that's sort of a shallow cash grab revival of an old thing. You know, like, I mean, I could lobby that criticism at Michael Bay himself for the Turtles when he did. Well, he didn't direct it, but produced the sequel to his produced TMNT film. It was just full of, let's chuck Krang in, let's chuck Bebop and Rocksteady in, and they just don't find any purpose for it whatsoever. So, yeah, empty referencing. You know, it shows. I mean, even if you're not connected to it, you'll just be annoyed by it anyway because it's thrown it at you. And this film doesn't do that. So, good on them for that. Well done, Travis Knight.
I don't even remember. I can kind of remember what happened in the first Michael Bay Transformers movie, but then the rest, I don't think I've seen the last one, but they all just kind of blend together for me, and kind of a bit like what Aaron said. You know, they're obviously they obviously have an audience because they kept making them. Presumably, they wouldn't have done that if people weren't going to see them. But I just have to accept that they weren't for me. I did enjoy the nostalgia of the first one, and hearing Peter Cullen as Optimus Prime was great. But beyond that, they were. They weren't for me.
And it was a genuine visual achievement as well. You know, the first one, like, nothing had been ever done like that in live action.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it had that going for it. And it made you wait for that transforming stuff as well, didn't it? You know, it was a good chunk of the way through the film before you finally saw it in kind of all its glory. It was teased before that, but you get to sort of the midpoint, and then that's when you first get it. In sort of full, not out of frame, badly lit kind of thing. Yeah. So, shall we move into the spoilers? Transform into some spoiling thing?
Insert transforming noise here.
Yeah.
Insert transforming noise here.
Autobots, transform and roll out.
Yep.
Could be that.
Could be that too, yeah. I feel like I could separate each segment with that.
Oh, you should.
Maybe I will. Who knows? The gods of editing may smile on us today.
And if this was visual, it could be like my logo spinning into Aaron's logo.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that for the YouTube upload.
Oh, go on.
I don't know how to do that. So. If anyone wants to do it for me, give me a shout. Okay, so our first post-spoiler segment is the Q&A. And we have some questions from audience members. And they're all real people, as you might be shocked by. So, Angus, I think you said you had a couple of questions from the audience as well, so we'll just go through them and then see how it goes. So, the first question I got asked was by Susan. What happened to the beehive?
Say what?
So, when Charlie first meets Bumblebee, or first discovers Bumblebee, there's a beehive that's been built underneath the... next to the wheel. One of the wheels. And then the next time she goes to get Bumblebee and is trying to get the car to start, there's no bees. And there's no evidence that she got rid of the beehive or how she did it.
I don't want to talk badly of planning in films and continuity and so on, but I'm quite happy with it fell off. I don't know if I need any more than that. Do I?
Maybe
pretty ingrained.
He'd already accepted that he was now going to form a bond with her, and so he shook them out.
Possibly. I know it weirdly made such a big deal about the beehive being there, and she was even waving her arms around to try and not get stung. And then the next shot, they're not there. So yeah, I don't know. It's perhaps a question for the production team rather than us. But we could speculate. Yeah. It fell off, says Aaron. I don't have anything better than that. Do beehives just fall off things? I don't know.
I think if you've got a transforming robot that shakes itself around a lot, then yeah, it might do.
Mm-hmm.
Bumblebee was dormant at that point, though.
But didn't she, at some point, drive him away? That might have been enough just to make it fall onto the road.
Yeah. Perhaps. Or maybe
I don't know. I think I'm good with this one. I feel like, I'm all right, actually.
Okay. We'll move on from that one then. Good question, Susan. Thank you very much. The next one is this a prequel to the Michael Bay movies or more of a reboot? And that's from Rachel. And that's a very good question. I would call it more of a reboot.
Isn't it a confused mix of both?
I would say it
because they
leans more
didn't really
towards-
know what they were doing.
I'd say it leans more towards reboot
That's
than
it.
prequel. Because
I don't think you could watch this and then, even though the way it ends, I don't think you could watch this and then watch Shia LaBeouf bonding with Bumblebee and think, wait a minute, that would be a really strange transition.
yeah, there's
Obviously, it
also-
doesn't happen immediately because it's.
Yeah, there's also isn't this film about Bumblebee like blazing the trail for Optimus Prime and so on? So why is he doing that again?
Yeah,
20 years time.
but that's what's strange about why he gets a makeover at the end.
Yeah.
Wasn't it unfortunately one of those brutal things that occurs when the production company says, "Oh, see how you've mostly made your film? We need you to add this, and this in because our test audience didn't like what you've done. So can you just kind of make it completely different?" So by the time they'd actually gotten through to the end product, it might have supposed to have been a prequel, but it automatically forced itself into alt-verse because it couldn't do anything else.
Yeah. Although there are references to the first Michael Bay film that I picked up on because I remember it fairly well. The Camaro being the most obvious one at the end. Although there's actually a story reason for that. The yellow Beetle is no longer a viable disguise because too many people have seen that this yellow Beetle transforms into a robot. And it's not the most conspicuous of disguises if you know that. I mean, if he was, a white Beetle, maybe could blend in a bit easier or something, but the yellow Beetle probably get noticed quite easily. Also, you could see it as being... I mean, this film references the 80s cartoons. The Michael Bay films reference the 80s cartoons to an extent. It could just be that it's referencing a previous iteration of Transformers by referencing the Michael Bay films, because they are old enough, probably, to, have fallen into that we can reference them sort of sphere. I mean, it's 12 years?
It just feels like rebooting Spider-Man like 3 times in however many years that was.
Yeah. Although, The Amazing Spider-Man doesn't really reference the Tobey Maguire films, apart from, retelling the same story, but with a different villain. But there was also the Sector 7 thing, which is the secret government agency, but they have no idea that Transformers exist, despite the fact that they're supposedly taking Megatron apart for scientific innovation purposes. So that's another thing that doesn't connect.
They don't credit Transformers for inventing the internet.
Yeah, human innovation drops out. So I'm on the reboot side of the fence. I think it's more of a reboot that references what's come before, whether that be the 80s cartoons or the Michael Bay movies or anything else.
Are we deciding here what we think it should be now that it's done, or what we thought the production house was trying to do?
Yeah, I certainly think from a production standpoint, it was marketed as a prequel.
Yeah.
I mean, it was barely marketed at all, but it was marketed as a prequel. And it probably should have been marketed as a reboot, because if the whole reason it's not doing well at the box office is that audiences might be a bit sick of Transformers movies, they should market it from the point of view of, don't worry, this one's nothing like those.
What's this thought that it's not doing well, by the way? Because it's already made its money back and well, it's almost trebled its money. Is it just that it's not doing well compared to the more successful of the Michael Bay films?
It's just it's not gaining the traction that the studio wanted it to.
Yeah.
Because even trebling your budget isn't success anymore.
No.
I was encouraged back to it because I'd heard that it was, it was good and it was more true to the Transformers I wanted to see than the Michael Bay ones, because as I say, I stopped going to see those. So the news must have, if it was marketing or if it was reviews or something, must have reached me, and I think that maybe there's probably a great deal of people who would want to see it upon hearing that. So maybe enough news did get out, because if you say it's made its money back, or if it's going to continue to be profitable, then I don't think it's done too badly.
It was certainly a critical success, and I feel like since it has worked, it's people have enjoyed it, people have gotten a lot out of it, then they could just call this the reboot and use it to shape the direction of future films. It actually is a bit of a holdover from this weird Transformers writers' room idea they had, where they were going to make the Transformers into a cinematic universe, which, I can't imagine that was ever a good idea. I mean, Bumblebee gained some notoriety among audiences as being the kind of effectively the focus of the Michael Bay films. It was the first Transformer you got to know in those films and so on, but will your general audience really care about seeing... I mean, I can't even name some of these characters, so,
That's probably slightly unfair, though, because surely you would have said the same thing about the Avengers in their individual forms. Like, would the audience really care about a Norse god running around wearing silly trousers? I mean, if you say it in the right way, anything can seem like it could never work. But if they had done other things, if they had written better stuff, if they had offered certain crossovers and combinations and character plots, then maybe it could have.
Maybe, but they abandoned the idea before they even made this one, so that was that. So I guess to answer Rachel's question, I would say this is a reboot, and I'm happy it was. What would you guys say?
Yeah, I'm happy for it to be. I think it has to be a reboot. As the prequel, they've already said there are too many things that don't match up. Some things match up with the films to come, but there's enough that don't, that it seems like the only available option really is to say it's Altverse, it's another What If, it is a reboot, but keeping some of the points that presumably they'll want to use in future films.
Yeah. Angus, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. I think I'm slightly annoyed by the crossover stuff, or the holdovers from the old films, because I'd prefer if they just kind of cut bait with those, even though, as we know, there's a great deal of crew and staff and whoever was involved in making it that was involved here as well, so they're not going to chuck that all out the window. But I still think it would have been better, because of the way this starts, and you see some proper Transformers on Cybertron looking the way they should look, even though we know that they can change their disguises. But anyway, that was amazing to see. But yeah, I did just prefer a bit more of a clean break. That's why I don't really like the end that is a bit kind of ambiguous, as in, like, he could be now going on to eventually meet up with Shia LaBeouf. And like you said, there's a few more nods, and I suppose they're subtle enough that it doesn't sort of tie it directly to the first lot of films. So reboot, I'm happy enough with reboot.
And Ronnie's question is very much connected to that. It's what do you guys think Bumblebee did in the 20 years between the end of this movie and the start of the first live-action Transformers? And it's like, well, this
created 5 better films than previously were.
This film will never turn into those, as far as we're concerned. So
thank God.
I think he hosted 2 beehives.
Maybe he did. Maybe that's the sequel. Bumblebee's a hive of activity for bees. I don't know. Last question that I've got is from Adam, and this is probably one for you guys more than me. Why do they look like cars, trucks, etc. On their home planet when they've never seen them or been to Earth?
Yeah, that's actually not the one to pick out. He's absolutely right, but the one to pick out is actually Soundwave. It looks like a cassette recorder, and the robot that he ejects from himself turns from a cassette into an Earth animal. So that one is... Yeah, that's just the way it is on Cybertron. Sorry. We watch a lot of intergalactic telly. Sorry. That's just the way it is.
Well, they know Earth exists, but yeah, because Optimus tells Bumblebee to go there.
Well, to be fair to these guys, they've been at war for 5 million years. You get bored. You know what? You're just looking around for someone else to distract you. Honestly, anything looks good. You say, "Oh, cassette recorder! Oh my god, that's amazing!" I've never seen anything like that. Yeah, I'm totally going to be that. That's mine. You can't have it. But dibs.
Soundwave is my favourite, and it's because I love the whole cassette idea. Anything that goes into something else or comes out of something else, there's more Transformers within him. That's amazing. Unlike Megatron, who transforms into a smaller gun that has to be fired by another robot, Soundwave transforms, or a person, yeah. Soundwave transforms into a giant-sized tape recorder, so it's not even. It doesn't even shrink down to sort of human size to be able to hide as a ghetto blaster or blaster, the Autobot equivalent for that matter.
That's the change that he gets when he goes to Earth, I guess. Then because he was in the cartoon, he could shrink. That was the weird thing.
He could, I guess, yeah.
But to be a personal cassette player.
Yeah, but I'm sure I've seen it in the cartoon as well, where he just transforms and he maintains his size. So he's
size is irrelevant. Size is a dimension that you can entirely play with when you're in the Transformers. That's just a conceit you have to buy into when you're watching a G1. It's just that the X, Y, and Z coordinates are completely meldable into whatever you damn well please.
Yeah, and that's why all these things go to making him my favourite.
Is there an explanation for how the Transformers came about? What gave birth to them, in effect, and why they transform? I could have looked this up on Wikipedia, and so could listeners, I suppose. But I've got it in my head that they must be some kind of slave race to some advanced civilization.
That's it. You've actually hit it. That was the original from G1. That was the original setup.
It's also sort of vaguely referenced in the 5th film.
Oh, is it? Oh, right.
Something. I can't remember the name.
The transforming comes from right. So how? We're going to some massive lecture here. I was cut to the chase. The transforming comes from the Autobots being a more civilian-style robot, needing an advantage to fight off a military-style unit in the Decepticons. They went to war and found that they couldn't beat military hardware, so they turned to stealth and gave themselves the ability to transform. That gave them an edge, and then the Decepticons copied it, so they could cancel that edge, and there we are. Technological development upon their home world. Call it that, and you've got it.
I'll accept it. Fair enough.
Thus endeth the lecture.
I've heard worse. So yeah. Angus, you had some questions from the audience?
Yeah, I'll let you guess who this question came from.
Was it Natalie?
Well, wait until you hear the question. Is Bumblebee hotter than Optimus Prime?
Oh.
Was it Natalie?
Yes, of course.
I don't really have an opinion on that, I suppose.
Is it wrong that I do?
Well,
no, because I do as well.
Because I think Bumblebee's got that sort of youthful charm. He's a bit cuter, but he's still got to appeal to the younger woman. Whereas Optimus Prime's got the strength of the experienced man. I don't know if his looks are rugged, because I'm actually not genetically geared that way to look at metal, but I just get the feel of the older man syndrome. I could see that the younger Transformer women could be into that.
Do you think Optimus is a bit of a George Clooney?
I could totally go that way. Yeah, actually, yeah. I'd say.
I think Optimus Prime. I agree with you that Bumblebee's probably cuter, but I think that Optimus Prime is hotter. The more kind of grizzled, rugged leader type. Yeah.
Well, I do like I like Volkswagen Beetles, so I'll choose Bumblebee.
Yeah, you've missed the point here. Get out.
It's an answer.
No, it's not. Get out.
But I'm hosting, damn it.
I've got another question.
Is it also from Natalie?
This is not from Natalie. This is from our friend Jamie. He says, "Can you see John Cena?"
I'm assuming this is a reference to wrestling that will get because I don't like wrestling.
Yes, that is a wrestling joke. His catchphrase was, "You can't see me."
Alright, well, yeah, I could see him. He was there.
He's obviously lost a step.
That'd be so hilarious. It just, and featuring John Cena, and then it just cuts to like a blank, like a blank area.
That would be a good in joke. And I do have a final question, also from Jamie. How does the baddie hold up? Because he has seen the other films and knows that Megatron is obviously a good baddie, pardon the phrasing, but he's a classic baddie. He's got a great voice. At least the proper original Megatron did.
Hugo Weaving was fine.
How are the baddies in this film, do you think, compared to the antagonists in the other Transformers movies?
Well, I mean, they have some personality, which they didn't in the Michael Bay films. They also look distinctive. They're colour-coded and stuff, so you can tell them apart. I quite like the scene where they faced up against this blockade, and then they thought about, let's pretend to ally ourselves with, humans. It'll make our job slightly easier. And the fact that one of them was, more of the planner, and I can't remember their names, but and the other one was more, more bloodthirsty, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't extensively well developed, but you could sort of pin something on them.
Just because I have to drop kick and shatter.
Cool.
But seeing as I'm on that, do you know what I didn't really follow about the choice of the villains was why they were two entirely new Decepticons.
Yeah, I wondered that as well.
Weren't from any of the previous continuities, despite what connections people have tried to draw with Dropkick to desperately connect him to G1. We can just say, no, he doesn't have a connection. Given that they actually used quite reasonably well-known villain for Bumblebee to kill in Blitzwing, and given that they bring in other characters that are perfectly well recognised, I'm not sure what the value of making them entirely new Decepticons adds. I say especially because they were prepared to kill Blitzwing, so it didn't matter that they were going to kill off a main character at the end because they'd already done that.
Yeah, and staying true to the original, main characters should be able to just get melted left, right, and centre. So, yeah, I didn't really understand why they were new. I agree with you, Craig, that I think that they did what they needed to do. I like that they weren't just silver pointy things like in the Bay movies, and that they were clear and you could tell who they were at all times, and that they had their own sort of, like you said, characteristics. But I don't. Yeah, other than that, they were just kind of there, performing that role really of being the antagonist, chasing him down.
Yeah, I can't answer why they decided to come up with new Transformers instead of just sticking with ones that already existed. But
I just wonder if there might have been some sort of story plot reason why, or if it somehow connected to the other 5 films and I'd missed it.
No, I don't think it did.
No, fair enough.
I couldn't tell you what half the Decepticons were called in those films, though. They were all
generics.
Yeah, or half the Autobots, really.
Generics.
Outside of Optimus Prime and Bumblebee, I'm struggling. But yeah. So is that it for questions?
Yeah, the other ones I think were kind of covered by some of our earlier questions.
Cool. All right, let's move on to. I'll start with kind of characters and see how we got on. So we've got Charlie, played by Haley Steinfeld, who's our main character. She is the Shia LaBeouf of this film.
That seems a little harsh, isn't it?
What a title.
Interestingly, this film does pretty much what the first film does, in the sense that the main human character bonds with Bumblebee, except this film does it a lot better, and it does it a lot quicker as well. It doesn't waste any time getting you through the major story beats, and it makes something that it's endearing and urgent at the same time, rather than just let's have long scenes of I don't know, making fun of the dog and stuff. I don't know, but I liked Charlie. At first, I thought she might have fallen into that, rebellious, angsty teen trap, but she never does. She's very, very layered. There's clearly a lot to her. So I'm glad that they took the time to develop who she was and every kind of aspect of her personality, the kind of lost relationship with her dad, all that stuff. I think it all added up really nicely. And Hayley Steinfeld's just great. And everything I've seen her in, I think she's excellent.
The only thing I didn't really follow with her character was why she was into diving and where any of that came from. And she had a connection to her father through the thing that would also give her a connection to Bumblebee, which was great because it wasn't forced. It was something that would cause you to stumble across a machine lost in a junkyard. So that all seemed to be perfectly reasonable. Oh, and by the way, she's into diving, but not anymore. So I'm not saying it. Sorry.
Sorry. As soon as that was revealed, I just knew that there had to come back somehow.
When she could have just reasonably just jumped into the water at the end.
Yeah, she has to be a diving champion.
That's a bit negative on my part. So I just want to say I completely agree. Generally speaking, I couldn't fault any part of the character or the acting at all, but because you've already said the positive, I just threw that on the end there. But otherwise,
yeah, the diving bit was a bit weird. It was a bit underdeveloped in that she was supposed to feel connected to her father through it, because I guess that was the thing they did.
But she'd already had the music, which also she was able to share with Bumblebee, which connected into fixing his voice, perfectly well integrated, sewn into the plot. And she could fix cars, which she needed to do to get him working again because he's a machine and needed repaired. Perfectly well woven into the plot. Excellently done. And I think, why was there a need for a third thing? The two things seemed to be perfect as they were.
Yeah, it only came into play at the very end, which we know because she kind of takes a deep breath and then thinks, I can refine my diving skill. And then also just to cause a bit of drama at the teen party drinkathon where she was challenged to dive because everyone was like, oh, it's the diving champion, and then she couldn't do it.
Weird thing to haze her about, isn't it?
I know, that was a bit weird.
You're such a loser because you won't jump into the water with me.
Hey, it was the 80s.
I think that does sound like it could come from teenagers. That wouldn't be my first problem with it.
A 25-year-old teenager.
Well, yes, indeed. But that's just American cinema again.
Yeah, it's not just this film.
Yeah, although I think she's believably a teenager. I don't know how old she actually is.
I think she's about 4 years. She's 3 or 4 years beyond her teens most, and that's near enough, I guess.
Yeah, she looks young though. I think my first exposure to her was Age of 17, which is a great film. Because she kind of plays that. Well, she's a much more damaged teenager in that film in a lot of ways, but here she's a bit more mature in some ways, but immature in other ways.
I think if I got it right, I'd need to Google it. Is she the one from True Grit? Did I hear that right from someone?
I don't know.
Yes, True Grit.
She's in True Grit. It's been so long since I saw True Grit, so
she's quite established as an actress. Not just a newcomer.
Indeed, and the voice of Gwen Stacy in Into the Spider-Verse. There's a podcast coming soon. Very soon. Other than the confusing diving subplot, shall we call it, what kind of stuck out about Charlie to you guys?
I think that she was convincing as a bit of a rebel, but she was. We know why that was the case because of her relationship with her dad. The music was good. She had a good taste in music, and she wasn't enough of a rebel that she didn't stoop to working at an amusement park or in a corn dogs or something she was selling. Yeah. So she had that kind of undercutting her cool kind of rebel-y, greasery type side to her character. And riding a moped around when she really dreamt of owning her own car.
Yeah, she also feels like, or I get the impression that she feels like she's sort of sleepwalking through her life at that point. She's waiting for her life to start. her dad's death clearly put a stop to some ambitions that she had, and now she's stuck in this situation she doesn't want to be in. She doesn't really like her mum's boyfriend. Although I like that they don't actively demonise the mum's boyfriend, the "you're not my dad" type thing. He's a fairly nice guy, it's just that she doesn't want to accept him. Which is perfectly valid as a position to take when something like that happens.
It's tricky actually, because I'm possibly a child of the internet now, even though I was born before it. But it's easier to pull out negatives than it is positives, and therefore I'm stuck thinking, what can I say about this particular performance? Because I did think it was really good. I think one thing would be that it's a fine line, I think, when a character has to stomp around all the time, especially as a teenager, to make sure they're not annoying. And whether that was the writing or the acting, I think they did a really good job on this, because at no point did I ever feel like I wanted to tell her off as the grown-up. I really think that you felt for her in all of her problem situations. You did agree that she was the one who had been put upon by life. Even though the parents weren't demonized, they were the standard 80s parents from an 80s film, which I don't think was the wrong choice. I actually think making them that slightly cardboardy, useless parent was the correct thing to do, given the style of the film they wanted. They wanted you to go back to the 80s. They wanted you to have that the kids are cleverer than the adults perspective, so it is about the kids as the main protagonist of the film. And they weren't too stupid. I mean, they were too stupid, but not too stupid for an 80s film. They were exactly the way they needed to be. So she always felt put upon, and you were with her all the way through, whether it was Bumblebee wrecking her house, whether it was her parents requiring some daft things of her, like to smile more often. You were there with her in all of those particular scenes, and so I think that's particularly well done, maybe it's both sides, writing and acting.
Yeah, I think she struck a fine balance between, she obviously wanted to be cool, but not like the cool kids at school, but she also wasn't too cool to be amazed or kind of put off balance by finding a giant robot in her garage.
Yeah,
and I think she did a good job of that.
I mean, well, she was kind of moody, but she wasn't that stereotypical moody. She'd be happy at things, or she'd let herself be vulnerable, and only in certain situations, but she would let herself be vulnerable. And I think fleshing her out that way was the best way for it. And I loved her relationship with Bumblebee, and I loved the way they portrayed it. I mean, Bumblebee, because he loses his memory early in the film, is basically a child, and he has to be retaught all these things, which is obviously a mine of comedy. Thankfully, it's not frustrating comedy. I think a lot of the gags do work really well. I like seeing him sort of transforming into a 15-foot robot, or however tall he is, and then hiding behind a car because he's scared of this little tiny human standing in front of him. It's that kind of... because you would almost expect that to be the human reaction. So giving Bumblebee the human reaction humanises him, very early on in that respect. And the way they communicate is great. There's an awful lot of body language and figuring out what he's trying to say rather than what he's actually saying. And I think if they'd left his voice intact, it might have just been a lot of scenes of them sitting chatting, which wouldn't have been that interesting visually.
Yeah, the non-verbal stuff was good, and he's sort of cowering in the garage when he wants to hide at some point, and it is an interesting kind of juxtaposition to him proving that he's a capable soldier in the beginning when he's having that battle. So it's interesting to see him.
O'Brien for 5 minutes.
Yeah, interesting to see him kind of reduced down like that, or as you say, he's had his memory wiped, and then he feels very vulnerable.
Yeah.
I was expecting to be really annoyed by that, actually, because I really struggle with farce. Not because I hate farce. Actually, farce done well is just as good as anything else. There's no reason it shouldn't be, but I don't think modern farce is very clever, and it degenerates into either pointless slapstick, or it's something that's just not grounded in the rest of the plot. The joke just stands out. No connections, no reason the character did that other than because the physics of their universe demand that every X minutes of scene time they do something that is funny to some unseen force. Whereas I'm struggling to say why it didn't annoy me here, why I did like it. I think I might have to say that I've talked myself into suggesting then that it was always relevant to what was going on at the time. It wasn't just slapstick because it was slapstick. It's that farce that is right back to the old the black and white films, where the character turns around and knocks someone over with the big plank of wood because they're desperate not to knock over the other person that's standing on the first side of them, so that it has a reason for being there. You know, it makes sense to you. Because in a modern farce, it would just be he has a plank of wood and he twats somebody with it. It wouldn't be very clever. So I think it must have been that, but I'm slightly struggling to prove it to myself.
I think some of it was verging on a wee bit too cutesy, but I think it kind of towed that line. It walked up to the line and then maybe didn't cross it too much.
Well, that thing you were talking about happens in the scene where he wrecks the living room.
Well, exactly. That was my direct inspiration for that referral. Yeah,
desperately trying not to break one thing while trashing everything else around him.
I mean, it's a ridiculously old joke. I mean, there's no denying that they didn't invent that joke, but done well, there's a reason it's funny, because it's from someone who's not trying to hurt anything around them, and of course it goes completely the other way. Properly done, it does work. I mean, it wasn't hilarious, but it was welcome, I guess, which I don't find in a lot of modern farce.
It wasn't trying to be a laugh a minute.
No.
I think the gags do land for that reason, because they are deployed sort of sparingly. One of the funniest things I keep thinking of is that scene on the beach where she's trying to teach him how to hide, and then she hides behind a rock, and he also hides behind a rock. And the sort of payback scene is one that I think of as well. The trying to toilet paper the house, and he hurls the whole lot of it, and then he trashes the car by getting a bit overzealous. Stuff like that, and I think, that's... It sort of blends into the whole, this is what teenagers would do, and this is effectively Charlie trying to teach her pet new tricks, and it kind of blows up in her face in a way, because then she gets involved in a high-speed chase in her conspicuous yellow Beetle. What about Bumblebee on his own as a character? Obviously we see him as the capable... I guess he's just a foot soldier at the start.
I think he's supposed to be a scout, scout operations.
He doesn't even have a name to begin with. It's just
that was interesting. But...
Yeah, and he's only named by Charlie. But so he's a scout, and I quite liked it when he gets to Earth and he sort of talks to the military people by saying, I'm not here to hurt you or whatever else, and then he's attacked by that Decepticon that you named earlier. I forget his name.
That's fine.
Thank you. It is, although it looks a lot like what I thought Starscream was supposed to look like.
Yeah, they're part of the same unit of I forgot what they're called, actually. They have a name. They're part of a group of flying warriors. I'll find it.
Yeah, anyway. So you see him as that capable soldier, the very well trained, sort of able to think on his feet and stuff, and then he's they effectively press the reset button, gets his voice ripped out, so he can't express himself, his memory's corrupted, and he sort of reverts back to being a child. And I quite like that sort of the frailty of him early on. and how that kind of builds. Because when he gets back to sort of full fighting strength, you feel like he's sort of learned something as well, or he's learned to appreciate Earth and humans and everything else. So, it's not just that he gets his memory back and everything's fixed, it's more like he has to take those lessons that he's also learned, getting to that point, and apply them in some way.
I don't know if it was purposefully done, but I did appreciate the way they took it from the thought of an AI learning. I could envision a new AI that has great intellectual capabilities but no real way of knowing how to use it coming across as quite childlike. Because the creature that was the Bumblebee without any memories was more like, it wasn't just not having memories, it was more like not having understood how anything really works, except that you can still use all of your motor functions. So it feels like it's an AI that has all this power, but the coordination is gone. So I don't know what it is more, but it's more memories. It's also the experience of putting things together and realizing what they do. So he does seem to learn in a way that made me think, I've no real experience of AI, but that felt like what I can imagine an AI would be like, as it didn't need to learn how to do things. It can walk, it can jump, it can push stuff around. It just doesn't know why you would want to do any of those things. And these other people turn up and they've got all these amazing reasons for doing things. And so the machine is learning that. It's learning the why rather than the what. So it distinguished it from, I mean, you likened it to a pet, and it sort of was, actually. They made him very much dog-like, especially on the beach. But it wasn't. He wasn't purely a dog that had no ability to understand or learn beyond a certain dimension, and it wasn't a child that needed to slowly put things together. So I think I appreciated whether it was supposed to be an AI learning or not. Somehow it felt right for that.
And it adds a sort of in-universe explanation for how he gets discovered by the Decepticons as well. Because, he has no idea that anything's after him, and he's just blundering about, and then it ends up just being a simple mistake that alerts them to, his presence and where he is. So, it's stuff like that really works. It doesn't feel contrived in that way. Although, I mean, inventing the internet is, I suppose, a little bit contrived.
Yeah, a little bit.
Because, that's not how the internet works. I don't know. Connecting two phone lines doesn't make it the internet.
No, it should never have worked. But it doesn't. But let's just walk away from that. It's just the only way out.
Yeah.
I was glad that they didn't overdo the using the radio to talk too much, because it's a good idea, but I think it's best done in small doses. And it was like quite late in the film, I think, before he started properly communicating through song lyrics.
Just so happens that those songs are on at that specific time.
Yeah, you just have to believe that. And he's obviously, he's got a powerful enough AI brain to be able to kind of scan through it all and perfectly patch it all together. But yeah, I didn't realise that he was going to lose his voice, and when I realised that was going to be part of the plot, I was a bit worried that they'd lean too heavily on that. But then I think that there was enough, like you said, kind of dog-like of a relationship, that he didn't have to. A lot of it was kind of non-verbal communication. He didn't have to use the songs too much, and obviously the songs and the soundtrack in the movie is good because of the setting. But yeah, I was pleased with the way that turned out, because it played on me a little bit. I was a bit worried that they were going to go too radio heavy.
Yeah, it would have been an easy crutch to lean on, and I'm glad that they didn't lean on it, because it would have just been it would have made it possibly more dull than just having a chat about their feelings. This song easily tells you that Bumblebee is happy, but you can tell he's happy by the way he's expressing himself. Stuff like that. I think that I think that they did a really good job with that, and clearly very talented animators, and you've also got Haley Steinfeld's really talented performance, so she's able to play off this thing that isn't there, and it feels like there is that tangible connection.
Yep.
I wasn't so fussed about Charlie's parents. I think it's like you said, Aaron, they're the parents in an 80s film, and they're kind of there for whatever purpose they're supposed to serve. I'm surprised at how heavily they were featured, though. Like in E.T., how the mum basically disappears at some point, and is rarely seen. I was expecting that, and E.T. is obviously a comparison you can make with this film, and I think it's an intended comparison. They've tried to give you a sort of E.T. Iron Giant vibe with the way it comes across, and those 80s films where the parents are never around, or Stranger Things, I guess. I've only seen season 1, but the parents are never about there either.
The Goonies, The Karate Kid.
Yeah.
All great movies where the parents just disappear at some point.
Yeah. And it's accepted that sort of thing happens, but they're around for most of it, and they end up playing a sizable part in the ending. I mean, it is that teasing a car crash that never happens, which I thought was quite funny.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that they were okay, but they were, as you've said, they were pretty rote characters and did what they needed to do. I also appreciate that they didn't go too heavily down the stepdad as a bit of a dick. He turned out to just be a well-meaning kind of idiot.
Yeah.
But and the brother, I thought he was quite funny as well, just as the kind of, just like in a lot of these other 80s movies that we've been talking about, his love of karate was beautifully 80s, and yeah, he was just there to kind of be amazed by things and provide a bit more comic relief as well.
Well, it was when he was lying about Charlie being in her room. The obvious, very rehearsed, not natural sounding lie. I thought that was really funny. A character I thought was really pointless was Memo. I think you could have almost done without him, because he doesn't really add anything. And they make a joke out of it at the end, where it's like, world's already been saved, and he just shows up and he's like, you call my mum? It's like he's gone. But I didn't really buy their connection, although I like that they didn't do the standard, he's going to be our boyfriend.
I think that was his real reason for being there, if I'm honest. That final scene.
For that joke?
Well, I'm not sure joke. I think it was more social commentary, saying just because you're in the situation doesn't mean you have to get together. Commentary, that's not what women want, really, sort of thing. It's, I think it was just to get to that point. He needed to be in there for them to make that comment, and then perhaps they didn't really give him anything to do. But then maybe that was all part of it. Maybe that was supposed to be one big, long, singular point, that this is the reason why you don't have to get together with this person, because there's no reason why they are particularly necessary and useful to you throughout. I think that's a bit cynical, but I don't know what else to say about him other than perhaps someone said, "Can we have a love interest, please?" Yeah,
I suppose. I just think you could have cut him and not really lost on anything. He wasn't bad, but I wasn't that engaged by him either.
Yeah, I'd agree. Again, a bit kind of just there to be wide-eyed and provide a bit more of that sort of comic angle to things, and not save the day. So that's kind of the most 2018/19 message of the movie, was that she doesn't want to hold his hand or give him a kiss or need to be saved by him at all, because she's perfectly capable of doing all these things with her robot friend.
Yeah. She's a strong, independent woman, doesn't need no man. I suppose another version of the film could have been that it would have been Memo that was the lead, but I think they purposely went with a young woman to be, well, maybe to be a bit different, and because you get so many of these boy in his car type stories, don't you? That's what the first Transformers film is, or at least some of it is. About an hour of it is. So it flips the script a little bit.
I suppose the simplest explanation for why he's there is to give her someone to talk to, because she can't have a conversation with Bumblebee. That's the point. But at some point, somebody does need to say, I think we should do a run on that base and try and rescue him. You know, you don't want exposition, but at some point somebody has to say something, otherwise it is just a bunch of people clearly thinking a lot of things very seriously. So he sort of needed to be there for plot purposes. It is a bit of a shame that he couldn't have been slightly more capable, because I think they would have still been able to have the meaningful ending where they do not get together in a romance. There's no harm in her having a friend on the journey with her. There's no harm in her at some point feeling a little bit of doubt, or just because you're a strong, confident woman doesn't mean you have to have all the answers. You know, that you are still allowed to occasionally listen to suggestions from another person. So it feels like he was he was pushed down a bit too far to make him a worthy character. I think there was room for him, as I say, just to be a sidekick. Everybody has a sidekick. Lara Croft gets a sidekick, even if just, as I say, to have someone to talk to whilst we're divvying out the guns, you know.
Yeah.
Could it have been the brother and like make it a bit of a kind of family affair, you know, a family caper, the way that some of these movies that it's clearly kind of riffing on, or did they have to, you know, does it help to have someone who has the potential to be a romantic relationship, but that's kind of a bit of a swerve because that's not the way it ends up going.
Well, you couldn't have your social commentary ending if you made it the brother, and I think that was important. The writer seemed like she wanted to take it back to the 80s, but only in certain ways that are palatable to a modern audience. The other parts of the 80s films are gone and need to stay that way. However, if she was prepared to give up that point and just rework the 80s films without having to, you know, to make it as an active comment, then she could have made the brother a bit older and just said, well, yeah, it's a buddy movie, it's a family movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think removing they didn't remove it because it was still there, but the familial connection. So if it had been Charlie, Bumblebee, and Charlie's brother, then, you know, the brother might have been there a bit too often, and it might have been, you know, the relationship might have been the three of them, whereas it was specifically focused on Charlie and Bumblebee. You know, all the emotional heft comes from those two characters, whereas Memo doesn't connect to Bumblebee in any measurable way because he's not supposed to, because it's not his story. But, you know, you have to get to that point where you know, where Charlie believes he's dead, and I suppose someone has to be there to say, no, he's dead, just leave him, before he naturally sits up, E.T. style, and he's fine, despite having been shot in the head by what you presume is a fairly powerful gun. It was a good moment, though. I mean, it was probably the strongest E.T. connection for me, that particular moment, because you have the infamous almost death scene in E.T. as well, but I think if the brother had been had been the third wheel in effect, it would have muddied that a bit.
Maybe, but I do think that in a lot of these 80s movies we're talking about, there's always that kind of, I mean, that's what he was playing, was the kind of annoying kid brother who wants to be involved all the time but gets kind of pushed out of the way. But yeah, I think that maybe that would have given it, for me, it would maybe have given it a bit more of a stronger vibe connecting it to those, because in those movies usually the kid brother or kid sister or whoever gets taken along for part of the adventure, and that's kind of what makes it those movies were so great to watch with your family or with my sister, because, you know, it was something like you could imagine, maybe this could be something that we could get wrapped up in, you know.
You just find your transforming robot friend, and then
and as annoying as your little sister is, you know, eventually you're like, come on, let's go.
Yeah. What about Agent Burns, John Cena? I thought he was great. John Cena is hilarious.
I don't think he was particularly stretched in this role.
No, of course not. I saw him in Blockers last year and thought he was really funny in that as well. You know, he's a lot funnier than I guess. I mean, I suppose people do give him credit for being quite funny, but yeah, but he was very good. I like that he's the military guy who's the only one that that sees any sense. You know, they're literally called Decepticons. Does that not raise any red flags? And then the guy's like, yeah, but we're using them. And I'm ordering you to do this. And he's like, right, cool, I have my orders, I'll just do them, even though I think they're stupid. So it's like that, yeah, he's only half-heartedly going through with stuff because, you know, obviously he's beholden to follow orders, but he thinks it's dumb at the same time.
I think he is funny. I think he's a good actor. I think he's probably going to attempt to follow that same kind of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson trajectory. And that this, I know he's been in a couple of films already, like you just mentioned, but I think going for these kind of military parts is the kind of safe, get your foot in the door sort of role that you can go for before maybe transitioning into, like I say, I think he could probably. The Rock still does his fair share of action movies, but he'll be in a Moana or in a, more family-friendly movies playing different sorts of characters than you'd expect nowadays. So I think John Cena he's perfectly capable of doing that. But as I say, I think he's taking these kind of take the roles that people expect him to play first, and then maybe transition to that in the future.
It would have been so easy for him to be the pantomime villain, though. You know, he could have just been the military guy, the evil military guy. And I think one of the trailers hinted at that because they showed him standing at the foot of a blockade, and looking a bit shifty. But I'm glad they didn't go that route. I was impressed that they didn't do that.
Yeah, I think that's probably. I don't know. I would have expected. I expected him to do pretty much everything he did in this. Anyway, even if he was part of the antagonistic human faction, he was always likely to be the one that was had the heart of gold and let him off with it at the end, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I just loved his comic timing, where he was questioning the parents. It was like, I stole a box of whatever it was, some sweets, when I was old, and he's like, yeah, we know about that. Just a reference to the fact that the government are watching you even then, and you somehow learn these things.
Yeah, who would have thought that getting hit over the head repeatedly with a steel chair sets you up for a life in comedic action roles?
Yeah. Aaron, did you like Mr. Burns? Agent Burns. He is a mister.
He is a mister.
I think he's another character that's defined by what he manages to avoid, and that's a good thing, as you've said. He would have been so annoying if he'd have been played further into the stereotype that he was edging towards. He did well at the start to block that, actually, by doing the comedy with the paintball gun, because the character that is traditionally in the 80s film with the stick up his arse, who is definitely the villain and always does the wrong thing and makes the wrong decision so the bad guys can get even greater advantage, is just too annoying. So by having him in the middle, he was able to still do what he needed to do, get in the way, make things harder, but not in a ridiculous way. So he does well by not being too grim, not being too stupid, and doing the job.
And he sort of sympathises with Bumblebee early on when he first lands. I mean, they chase after him, but then they find out that he doesn't want to hurt people, and then they see him be savagely attacked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is that. So again, he's just sort of following orders, which
in a bit of a ham-handed way at the end, you see it, what it's supposed to be. The relationship is, hey, he's a fellow soldier, and we both know where we stand. Now, the salute at the end is very 80s and was a bit too far for me, but generally played throughout, where it's, well, hang on, you're a soldier that just got attacked by an enemy soldier. I completely relate to that. That's the level that I like to that, and would have kept it there throughout if possible.
Yeah. I would have just liked to see a bit more of him. I think he was criminally underused. cut memo and give us more burns. That's my take. So, I mean, we've kind of touched on what the story is in terms of the kind of what happens, and I do like that it's really simple. It spends more time on the relationship than building up effectively the Autobot hunt that makes up the cause of it. So Bumblebee has to find a suitable place for the Autobots to hide out, which is Earth, which he's already been told to go to. It's a bit weird. Go here and make sure that it's safe, but we already know it's safe because we're sending you there. But yeah, whatever. It's just a reason for him to be there. But yeah, keeping it character driven rather than plot driven was the right thing, and as opposed to the Michael Bay films that don't really do either. They just meander along until eventually they finish. But there was, a distinct structure here. Everything happened because of other things, and then it came to a satisfying conclusion, more or less.
More or less.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you have the big blowout at the end, and I thought that was even just quite a creative fight as well. You get the sense that Bumblebee's outnumbered, Charlie's useful, the objective is very simple.
I don't know what they did with the other films, obviously not having watched them, but one of the things that stands out for me is as the best part of that fight. I mean, it is a bit of a... It's purely for visuals, I guess. I don't know if it makes sense. No, I don't know. Either way, what am I trying to get to? Say something useful. See the bit where in the fight and a character that can transform into a car gets thrown. It seems very appropriate that character doesn't just collapse to the ground and scrabble to their feet. They turn into a car, land perfectly, use the momentum to turn round, and then use the same momentum to come back at high speed to ram their combatant. And it's stuff like that that's what I want to see from a Transformers film. I don't want to see two large robots fighting as the big kaiju films give you, where it's humans inside robots, where they just have to sort of battle in an awkward human form. I don't know that they used it a lot throughout Bumblebee, but that therefore when they did do it at the end, because I think he's fighting Shatter at the very end, and he transforms in a useful, meaningful way, and you think that's a great fight scene. I was really into, because it used who they were. It's almost like using their form of a martial art. It made perfect sense.
Well, it does happen in the Bay films as well. They do move very gracefully.
Right.
Because they should move gracefully. Because, they're not man-made. They are living beings. They shouldn't be clunky. So, I think some are clunkier than others in the other films. But, on the whole, they're... the ones you would expect to be manoeuvrable are all manoeuvrable. So, Bumblebee's biggest advantage is he's smaller, therefore faster, and a bit nimbler than the other two. And, uses that to his advantage. So you could... There was definite tactics going on in the fight.
Yes.
Which, as opposed to, we'll just keep hitting each other until someone's head comes off.
Well, I think that's a big danger that you're suffering a lot with some of the superhero stuff that's on TV at the moment. There's only so many different ways they can show you a cool martial arts maneuver where the good guys fight and win. So when you do actually see somebody try and choreograph something and put some thought into it, it really does stand out.
Yeah. Angus, what did you think of the kind of the structure of the story and in that action sequence at the end? It was really the only... Well, there was obviously the action sequence at the start. There was a return to that action sequence in the middle of the film. And, that was about it.
Preferred the action that happens at the beginning of the movie, because it happened at the beginning and it was a wee bit different to Big Battle, which is always in the dark and usually involves hulking robots or Iron Men or superheroes smashing each other about for 20 minutes at its most merciful.
Is it also because it was unadulterated fan service as well?
Yeah, I just think it looked better. I think it just all worked better, and there's a bit more dialogue in there, and there's just a lot more to it than at the end, I appreciate what you've said about the choreography at the end, but yeah, I think that's why I preferred the earlier stuff. If they'd had something like the initial fight at the end, that would have been good. But then they wouldn't have had the initial fight at the beginning.
Yeah, they could have, I suppose, easily returned to some big battle on Cybertron, and then, I guess, delivered something a bit more derivative. But I like the strategy. I like seeing strategy in fights, and the fact that there's two Decepticons versus Bumblebee is, it's the underdog story, isn't it? It's always the underdog. The heroes have to be outmatched and outwit the superior force of the villains.
Yeah, and of course we got that dive, that necessary dive.
Yeah, it's not as if she saves Bumblebee by diving. He's fine. He's just chilling at the bottom of the.
Maybe she saved herself.
Yeah, maybe. It also references the Shape of Water in some way, which is probably not a comparison you want to make. Yeah. So you would like to see more Cybertron action?
Oh yeah, that was some of my favourite stuff, and they were actually colourful and looked right according to what I consider right.
What do you think of the possibility that they could do a sort of Prime spin-off? A thing about Optimus Prime on his own.
I think he's probably best when he's a leader, when he's involved with his team.
Well, we were having that discussion after the film, weren't we, Aaron? It's like, you have to go right back to the beginning, otherwise he has nowhere to go.
Yeah, I think there's room for something in his history, if they wanted it, where he learns to become a leader. I don't know if there's an audience for it, but I think there's room in the plot.
Yeah, because otherwise he's just the wise leader that orders people about, and there's nothing.
But generally, I think what I was saying to you when we were chatting to it after the film was some of the stuff that I liked about the cartoon was when the character that had the unwavering ideology of the day, so he was supposed to be the shining example of correct choices, was placed into a situation whereby his ideology couldn't help him. I think the most obvious one that fans of G1 cartoon will be able to name the episode directly, and I can't because I'm not that good, but there's the, of course, crazily over the top story where the choice he has to make is between saving Earth or saving Cybertron because of some collision of events. And it's one of those impossible choices. So the character that has the perfect ideology is still stuck and has to try and come up with a solution. I mean, of course, it's a kid cartoon from the 80s, so in the end, of course, they save both. But the point was they at least go down that route of saying, you've said that you must do the right thing in all cases. Okay, well, the evil Decepticons give you a choice where there is no right thing. Go, what do you do? And I've always valued that in the cartoon from the 80s that dared to do something, something along those lines. It did point out to a child that, sometimes there isn't a singular right way to go, and it's just a matter of whether you can punch the bad guy hard enough or not. Sometimes it actually is just... It is just difficult, and you have to find a way of applying the lessons that you've learned from base principles. So I think there's room for an Optimus Prime to have to make that type of decision. And I don't know whether that would need. I don't think that needs to be early in his career, but I think it would be easier certainly.
They sort of touch on that in some of the Michael Bay films. The first film, he's sort of this virtuous leader who's like, I will protect the humans at all costs. They deserve to make their own mistakes. They deserve to learn. We had our chance. And then by the time you get to the first Mark Wahlberg film, he wants to kill Fraser because Fraser has melted down a lot of his people. So I'm not going to say it was good. But it was something, they did sort of test his resolve. as the films went on. And I suppose that kind of thing is what you're talking about. It's like, what would drive Optimus Prime to kill a human, or that kind of stuff. What would drive him to intervene in stuff that's none of his business? And
yeah, exactly.
Because obviously the Prime film would have to be earthbound in some way, wouldn't it? Because otherwise you just alienate a large chunk of the audience who might not want to watch essentially a CGI cartoon on the big screen.
Logically, unfortunately, but logically.
I don't know. He'd be your next logical stop for a spin-off, though, because he's the other character that people like me know about.
Yes.
Yeah. Although I did like I forget when it came out, but it was a cartoon called Transformers Prime. It was CGI animated. It had Josh Keaton in it as well, voicing a human character. The Spectacular Spider-Man voice actor. Yeah, it was good. I think it ran for about 3 seasons, something like that. And it was... I found it fairly watchable, for the most part. I don't remember much about it, which probably says a lot about it in itself, but...
Was he isolated in that?
No, but he did have kind of non-conventional choices to make, and had to navigate a kind of tricky landscape.
I wouldn't want to see it if he was isolated and it was another kind of something like this, because I think that Bumblebee works quite well in that he's a scout and he's out there on his own. But yeah, I think Prime works best when
he gets found in a junkyard and he has no memory and he becomes a mechanic.
I think he works best when he's the leader of the team, and when he's got, he works best with his arch rival being the antagonist, and I think we've already had those movies.
Yeah, this is true. We've talked a lot about like the 80s-ness of this film, and actually, I was thinking to myself recently, I thought this film almost feels like it was made in the 80s. If you look at the stylistic stuff, like even the clothes are very 80s, and they don't try and highlight any particular fashion trends, and even the cars are just kind of dull. Not everyone has a proper full-scale 80s, classic car. It's, even the popular mean girl type, she just has that, pretty boxy looking, is it a Mercedes? I don't know. She has a fairly boxy looking, unimpressive car. And I quite like that. Just, it's almost like they made it in the time period it's set in. And obviously you've got the music, which, all the needle drop music cues.
Well, you are correct. They did do that.
So, on that note, is there anything else we have to say about this film?
Well, I think I wouldn't mind going back to just the references to the 80s film. Because I know they reference the old cartoons, but they did reference the old 80s film as well. And I know you've said your piece on it, that it's there for if you wanted it, and it wasn't too much in your face if you didn't. But I don't think I want to go away without mentioning it, just because it did mean, quite a lot to me. And it is quite small, but it's just moments like the point right at the start where they're having a battle, it's going wrong, and then Optimus Prime jumps in from the side to save the day. Now that is an iconic moment in Transformers the movie. It's almost one of the moments that define the whole film.
Is that the point where he gets killed? Spoilers.
Spoilers, yeah. Well, it leads up to that point, and the reason I want to give it mention is because it was such an important moment for me as a 10-year-old watching, because I think it's one of the moments where I must have seen for the first time and realised what I was seeing, which was self-sacrifice. And I don't want to draw too much into a film that obviously was for kids, and I was 10 years old, but just to say that it did mean a lot to me, that because I did draw something from it and they did reference it, I kind of been the only one from watching that film that at that point was just glued to the telly, or cinema screen, you know what I mean? And they even do it quite subtly. Yeah, exactly. And the reason I wanted to give it some mention is because they didn't go over the top with it. It wasn't a big self-sacrifice moment. They didn't make it into this big scene where the camera stays on Prime too long just so you know how cool he was. I don't think they played it too hard. I think it was just a nod, and I do appreciate that, because some of the ones are really subtle as well. That Brawn gets shot in the shoulder in the early scenes, which is something that that happens in Transformers the movie, and you think, well, that's just even an unnecessary nod. But it points out that they cared enough to go into it, have a look at it, find out what it was, and not make it a meaningless nod.
Well, Travis Knight is a fan. He was at Comic-Con promoting the film, and he was making all these references apparently that people understood, and people were quite chuffed because he was, saying the right things. So he's a fan making a film, about something that he loved, and he would have been like you. He would have grown up watching it as well.
Absolutely.
So they finally hired a director that has that reverence and wanted to, celebrate that, I suppose. I saw someone on, I think it was on YouTube, I forget who, but they talked about, this is the film where Transformers fans can show you why they like Transformers. And I mean, because I don't have a connection to it, I can only take their word for it, but I totally get it. And
I think I'd struggle to show you from this film why I liked the previous, because they don't harp on about it too much. They are just nods. I think I would describe it more that it's the film where the Transformers fans can remember what they liked about it and not feel it was lost. That was the thing. Because when they play the touch at the, just before she's supposed to dive off the cliff to show how cool she is by diving, it's a nod. It is actually supposed to be something that if that music was playing, it would be playing over the top of something heroic, and jumping from a cliff is obviously going to be heroic for her because she needs to have that courage. So they do. Not only has he taken something from the film, they could have picked any 80s power ballad for that moment, because it would just be, you just get the strength from inside you and throw yourself into the action. But they didn't. Yeah. They played the touch, which is all about which is actually Prime's main song. It's the point where you do actually have to have a lot of courage to do what he did. And what is it, 3 seconds at most? It's, but it's there,
just those 3 words.
And it shows that they care.
No, there's 3 or 4 lines, I think.
Yeah.
My question is, was the song written specifically for that film, or was it a pre-existing song?
I don't know, now you've said that.
Because if it was written specifically for that film, in this universe, why does that song exist?
I'm not sure, but there are a couple of Stan Bush film songs in the film, but I'm not sure whether or not they just really loved Stan Bush enough to kind of include 2 of his songs.
It's a good question. Let's find out. It features prominently. This is great listening for people.
Yeah, carry on.
It was used in the film Boogie Nights. That doesn't make any difference. It doesn't say. It was from the album The Transformers the Movie original motion picture soundtrack. So it suggests that it was intended for use in that film, if nothing else. Wait a minute. Originally written for the Sylvester Stallone film Cobra.
No way.
Its inclusion in the Transformers soundtrack was Bush's first exposure to the franchise. The touch was also featured in the Transformers animated series 1987 episode The Return of Optimus Prime Part 2. I'm just going to read the entire Wikipedia page. No, it was written for another film and then used in this film. Okay, so in this universe they just don't use it in Cobra and it never gets used anywhere else.
It is a legitimate artifact.
There we go. That's fine. I'm happy with that.
Otherwise, your opinion on this movie would have changed entirely.
That's it. I mean, I knew the song. I have actually seen that film quite a while ago. Did not enjoy it. It has to be said. But I don't have any connection to the material. So, it was the first Transformers thing I'd ever seen, and I was lost. I had no idea who anybody was, what the hell was going on, why I should care.
It's a different context there, wasn't it? Because back then, the audience was the kids watching the film. There was no understanding these days that there's infinite material out there, so you have to fight for every pair of eyes as an audience, and therefore you have to be perfect. In the 80s, you could release a film knowing that the people who watch the TV series would go and watch it, and that would be enough.
And then there's the context of like we were talking about, how the gags all, for the most part, land. That reference works because it is just Bumblebee showing that he believes in Charlie's ability to overcome this fear that she's imposed upon herself. You could have accomplished that if he'd played Eye of the Tiger instead. It would have been the same effect, but it's a legitimate reference that works because it just works. So yeah, no issues with that. Again, empty referencing. That's why I didn't like Ready Player One, because it just kept chucking references at me without appreciating why I like those references, or why I might like those references. So
yeah, this didn't feel cheap like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and so that's two nostalgic 80s films in 1 year, in a sense. Whereas this one does it better. Yeah. So, any final points that you want to make on this film, Angus?
It brought me back to the cinema to see a Transformers movie, so it did something right.
And made you excited to perhaps see more Transformers movies?
Potentially, I'd have to do my research beforehand to make sure
evaluate on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely. There was enough in there to kind of stir up some nostalgia, but it wasn't entirely. My enjoyment of it wasn't entirely nostalgia based. Although the nods, the music, the way that some of the Transformers looked, the sort of G1 stuff, the fact that Soundwave's in there ejecting some Ravage, that was brilliant. That all worked for me. So yeah, I enjoyed all that stuff, and then the stuff that I wasn't expecting, I also enjoyed and really liked how it was. How it kind of riffed on not just Transformers, but other beloved 80s movies.
Cool. Aaron?
I would say that like Angus, the film that I want to see is the continuation of the scenes on Cybertron. However, I recognise that is a film that I cannot ever see because it is in the past, and it would be difficult, maybe impossible, to bring it back. But this film, Bumblebee, is then the perfect compromise between the film that I really want and what is realistic to put on screen. It gave me enough of both that I could enjoy it, even though it was different to my preferred. It was still done in the light of the first. It honoured the first, and it was enjoyable as well that it did even take me back to the 80s, as it were. So this can only be my favourite of the Transformers films, because I was never going to pick anything else. But despite that, I think it did earn it. I do think it stood as a good film without that. So yeah.
You could play as a compromise. You could play the two PS3 games that are like about the Cybertron war. I have them both.
Right.
They're entertaining. They're just third-person shooters with Transformers skin on them, but they're okay, from what I recall.
Well, I don't think that would take me close to as you say, even though they were kids' cartoons at a time when they did children's stories. They didn't worry about trying to play to a child's intelligence, and they didn't really go for it in the same sense that some kids' stuff does now. But they were still meaningful. They still had meaningful plot lines. I think I'd want a bit more than a third-person shooter could give me.
Well, you could play the soundtrack to the film in the background.
Oh, I see.
If you wanted, but it was just a thought. I'm going to say I really enjoyed this film. My exposure to Transformers is, I as I've said, is fairly limited. I got into it after the Michael Bay films. So I actually watched a cartoon called Transformers Animated as well, which was very different to those films, as opposed to the Transformers that aren't animated. And it was okay. In the Transformers Prime series, I quite liked that. Don't remember why, but I did for what it was. And the Michael Bay films, I'm not, I don't jump on the hate bandwagon as much as other people do. I do recognise that they're not that great, but
I built that bandwagon.
I don't think you did. So yeah, I love this film. I saw it twice, which I do often anyway. But I have to like a film to see it twice, or in the case of Venom, I have to be doing a podcast to see it twice. Enjoyed it. I love the central relationship. I love the references to E.T. and things like that. I liked the characters. It was just a good time. It was just a good feel-good time, and I'm going to get it on Blu-ray and watch it again. And I'll probably, it'll be one that I keep coming back to, I think, because it's an easy watch. Sort of final thing, what I'd like to see is you guys coming back to do a podcast about the 80s film.
Oh.
See, I could totally talk about that.
Yeah. I don't know if you would need a third party that has no idea what you're talking about, or not.
Well, a third party whose first exposure to Transformers was the 80s film.
Well, I could revisit it
with no context.
Follow it. We could try and set that up. Do people want that? Yeah, on a postcard.
I have my doubts, but like Aaron, I could probably talk about that.
I think it'd be an interesting experiment.
I could easily talk about it. I don't know what sort of balanced viewpoint you can get. Here's something that defined me as a child. Am I going to listen to you rip it to pieces?
I had the Power Rangers experience, so where that was savagely torn to pieces. So,
hey, I tried to provide some balance in that.
It's something we could discuss in the coming weeks, months, years, whatever. So that's something I'd be quite interested in. I'd quite like to, I've heard bits and pieces about what you think of that film, but I'd quite like to hear a more in-depth critique, I guess. It's pretty definitive early childhood experience for me as well, so I'm sure I could talk about it for a while. Let's make that happen. Yeah. So, any final points? And I know I just asked, but any final points?
I got mine in.
Go and watch the Transformers movie. Go and watch the Transformers episode of Toys That Made Us. And then go and watch all of the G1 Transformers series.
No, I think that's... Yeah. No,
Actually, you should probably watch the G1 series up to the point that then the movie starts, because I think it takes place within that.
Is that so I can just watch robots fighting over coloured cubes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone wants Energon.
Energon, yeah. So, thank you for indulging your love of Transformers to talk about Bumblebee. Thank you for being here, Angus.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Aaron.
Thank you.
Someone leave us off with a Transformers catchphrase.
Now light our darkest hour.
Oh, very good.
So that was our discussion of Bumblebee. Thanks to YouTubers El Guitar Tom for his cover of the Transformers theme, and Dan's Guitar Music for his cover of the Stan Bush song The Touch. If you like what you heard, then hit that subscribe button on iTunes, YouTube, or any major podcasting app. iTunes users, please do leave us a star rating and comment to let us know that you care. If you want to talk to us, then hit us up on Facebook and Twitter under Kneel Before Blog, or leave a comment on kneelbeforeblog.co.uk. As always, we hope you'll join us on the next Kneel Before Pod.